My mother's china cabinet has 23 wine glasses, each one worth more than my first car. She polishes them every Sunday morning, holding each stem up to the light like she's inspecting diamonds. I used to think it was about cleanliness. Now I know it's about proof. Tangible, breakable proof that the Radford family has arrived. That we matter. That we're the kind of people who own things that require white gloves and insurance riders. I'm Kaylee Radford, and I'm 42 years old. For the past 19 years, I've been a United States Marine, currently holding the rank of Major. For the past 19 years, my family has had absolutely no idea. It wasn't supposed to be a secret. When I enlisted at 23, fresh out of college with a degree in international relations that my father called unemployable, I told them I was joining the military. My mother cried. My father asked if I'd considered something more appropriate. My older brother, Preston, who was 3 years into his career at a boutique investment firm, physically laughed. The military, he'd said, swirling his scotch in a way that made me want to dump it over his head. Jesus, Kaylee. Mom and Dad are going to have to tell people you're finding yourself or something. I should have corrected the assumptions that followed. I should have explained that I wasn't just enlisting. I was entering as an officer, that I'd been accepted into intelligence, that my unemployable degree was exactly what they wanted. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the look on my father's face, like I'd just announced I was joining the circus. Maybe it was the way my mother immediately started talking about when you come back and get this out of your system. Or maybe I just wanted to see how long they'd keep underestimating me. 19 years, that's how long. The first few years, I tried. I'd come home on leave in my uniform, ribbons and rank visible, trying to show them this wasn't a phase. My mother would kiss my cheek and say, "You look so official, honey," in the same tone she used when my nephew dressed as a policeman for Halloween. My father would ask how the training was going, as if I were perpetually in boot camp. Preston would make jokes about mess hall food, and ask if I'd learned to make my bed with hospital corners yet. After my first deployment to Iraq, I came home with a Bronze Star. I mentioned it once at dinner. My father said, "That's nice, dear," and then spent 20 minutes talking about Preston's promotion to senior analyst. After my second deployment, I stopped trying. I developed a system. When they asked what I did, I kept it vague. Security consultation, or government contract work, or when I was feeling particularly honest and they weren't listening anyway, I travel a lot for work. They filled in the blanks themselves, creating a narrative that fit their worldview, their daughter, the perpetual disappointment, bouncing between odd jobs, never quite settling down, never quite measuring up. The irony was exquisite. While Preston was analyzing market trends from his corner office in Manhattan, I was briefing generals on tactical operations. While my father was networking at country club dinners, I was coordinating joint operations with allied forces. While my mother was volunteering for charity galas to maintain our family's standing, I was earning the respect of soldiers who'd follow me into hell without question. But at family gatherings, I was still the family joke, the black sheep, the one who never quite found her path. Kaylee does something with computers, my mother would say vaguely at parties, which was technically true if you counted classified communication systems. She's very independent, my father would offer, which was code for unemployable. Still figuring things out, Preston would add with a sympathetic smile that made my teeth hurt. The pet sitting thing started as a favor. My neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, needed someone to check on her cats while she visited her daughter in Florida. I had 2 weeks of leave, nothing planned, and I liked cats more than I liked most people. She offered to pay me. I declined. She insisted. I accepted $50 to keep the peace. Somehow, my mother heard about it. "Kaylee's pet sitting now," she announced at Easter dinner, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced brightness that meant she was mortified. "Isn't that sweet?" Quote, "It's a favor for a neighbor," I said, cutting into my lamb with more force than necessary. "Of course it is, honey," my mother patted my hand, "and it's wonderful that you're so flexible. Not everyone can transition between jobs so easily." Preston's wife, Melissa, a pharmaceutical sales representative who treated her job like she'd cured cancer personally, leaned forward with aggressive sympathy. "You know, Kaylee, if you ever want me to look over your resume, I'd be happy to help. The job market is tough, but there are always opportunities for people willing to start at the entry level." I was 39 years old. I had just returned from leading a crisis response team in Syria. I commanded a unit of 73 Marines. My security clearance was so high that even mentioning its level was classified. "That's very kind," I said, smiling with enough teeth to be considered bearing them. I'll keep that in mind if I ever need to sell pharmaceuticals to doctors who'd rather be golfing. Kaylee, my father said sharply, Melissa is trying to help. Of course she is, I agreed. Everyone's always trying to help me. It's heartwarming, really. The conversation moved on. It always did. I'd become skilled at deflecting, at giving non-answers that sounded like answers, at changing subjects before anyone could pin me down. It was easier than explaining. Easier than watching them not believe me, or worse, not care. My brother's career became the family's favorite topic. Preston had done well, genuinely well. He'd moved from analyst to senior analyst to associate director over the course of 15 years. He made excellent money, lived in a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn, had 2 well-behaved children who played violin and spoke French. He was everything my parents had dreamed of: successful, respectable, impressive at dinner parties. I was happy for him. Truly, Preston wasn't a bad person. He was just limited. He saw the world through a very specific lens. Prestigious universities, corner offices, 6-figure salaries, vacation homes. Anything outside that lens didn't quite compute. Last Christmas, he'd tried to give me career advice. You know, Kay, he'd said, using the nickname I'd hated since childhood, you're smart, you've got a degree, you just need to commit to something. Find a real career path, you're not getting any younger. I'd been planning a military intelligence operation that would be briefed to the Secretary of Defense. I was coordinating with the CIA, NSA, and 3 foreign intelligence services. I had a team of analysts working around the clock, billions of dollars in resources at my disposal, and the weight of national security on my shoulders. You're right, I'd said, sipping my wine. I should really settle down. Maybe get one of those jobs where I sit in meetings and pretend my spreadsheets matter. That's not what I meant. Or maybe I could sell pharmaceuticals. I hear there's good money in that. Preston had sighed, exchanging a look with my father that said, "See, this is what we're dealing with." The pet-sitting comment became a running joke. Not to me. To them. My mother would mention it to her friends with a brave smile. Kaylee's doing pet care now. Very entrepreneurial. My father would shake his head sadly when asked about his children. My son's in investment banking. Very successful. My daughter is finding her way. Preston started introducing me at his work functions as his sister who was between things. When pressed, he'd say I did odd jobs or freelance work. Once, at a company dinner, someone asked me directly what I did. Before I could answer, Preston jumped in with, "She's taking some time to figure out what she wants to do. Not everyone's career-focused, you know?" I'd excused myself to the bathroom and laughed until I cried. The breaking point should have come a dozen times. It should have come when my mother forgot to mention my name during her holiday newsletters section on family accomplishments. It should have come when my father pulled me aside to gently suggest that maybe I should consider going back to school, as if my master's degree in strategic studies from the Naval War College didn't count. It should have come when Preston's kids asked what Aunt Kaylee did for work and Preston said she helps people with their pets, before changing the subject. But it didn't break. I let it build. Every condescending comment, every pitying look, every assumption that I was somehow less than them because they couldn't comprehend what I actually did, I filed it away. Not out of anger. Exactly. More like curiosity. I wanted to see how far it would go, how long they could maintain this delusion, what it would take to shatter it. I got my answer on a Tuesday in November. Preston called me 3 weeks before the dinner. "Hey Kay, listen, I'm getting promoted to Director of Investment Strategy. It's a big deal. Barrington himself is hosting a dinner to announce it." Keith Barrington was the CEO of Whitmore & Associates, the investment firm where Preston worked. I'd never met him, but I'd heard about him plenty. Preston name-dropped him constantly, always with a reverence usually reserved for royalty. "That's great, Preston. Congratulations." "Thanks. So the dinner is in 3 weeks. Friday the 22nd. It's at Cristallo. You know, that new place in Tribeca that got the Michelin star? Barrington's treating it like a major event. Partners, senior management, some clients, and he said to bring family, so you should come." I should have said no. I had a briefing scheduled for that week, a security assessment that would take days of prep work. But something in Preston's voice, that performative casualness that meant he was actually nervous, made me pause. You want me there? You're my sister, Kay. Of course I want you there. He hesitated. Look, I know we give you a hard time about the career stuff, but this is important to me. It would mean a lot if you came. Wear something nice, okay? This is a high-level crowd. I'll see what I can do, I said, which wasn't a yes, but also wasn't a no. I shouldn't have gone. I knew that even as I was rescheduling my meetings, even as I was packing my dress blues into a garment bag alongside a cocktail dress, even as I was booking the train to New York, this was a bad idea. This was playing with fire. But I was so tired of being underestimated, tired of watching them pity me, tired of the elaborate fiction we'd all agreed to maintain. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to see what would happen if someone finally called them on it. The briefing I'd rescheduled was for Operation Sentinel Dawn, a joint counterterrorism initiative that I'd spent 8 months developing. The meeting was critical, final approval from CENTCOM before we moved to the implementation phase. I'd moved mountains to reschedule, called in favors, worked 20-hour days to prep my deputy to handle the preliminary briefings without me. My commanding officer, Colonel Hayes, had not been pleased. Major Radford, this operation requires your direct oversight. The timeline is inflexible. I understand, sir. Captain Morrison is fully briefed and capable of handling the preliminary meetings. I'll be available by phone for any critical decisions, and I'll be back Sunday night for the final authorization meeting Monday morning. This is highly irregular. Yes, sir. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. He'd studied me for a long moment. Hayes was old-school Marine, a man who'd come up through the ranks and valued loyalty and judgment in equal measure. This about family? Yes, sir. They know what you do? No, sir. His eyebrows had risen slightly. In 19 years? It's complicated, sir. I imagine it is, he'd sighed. Fine, but Radford, whatever's happening with your family, don't let it compromise your judgment. You've got a good head on your shoulders. Don't lose it over something personal. Understood, sir. I'd left his office wondering if I was already compromising my judgment. If this entire trip was a monumentally stupid idea driven by ego and exhaustion. But I didn't cancel. I got on the train Friday afternoon, watching the landscape blur past, and tried to convince myself I was doing this for Preston, not for me. I was lying to myself. I was absolutely doing this for me. The restaurant was exactly what I'd expected. Understated elegance that screamed money, soft lighting that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and servers who moved like synchronized swimmers through the space. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple black cocktail dress and heels that made me 3 inches taller and significantly more dangerous. My family was already there. Preston in a perfectly tailored suit, looking nervous and excited. Melissa in designer everything, her smile sharp and white. My parents dressed like they were attending a state dinner, my mother's pearls probably worth more than my annual salary. Kaylee, my mother kissed both my cheeks, European style. You made it, and you look lovely. Is that dress new? New to me, I said, which was true. I'd bought it 2 years ago for a different event and had worn it exactly once. Well, it's very nice. Her tone suggested it was anything but. Come, let me introduce you to everyone. The next hour was an exercise in social torture. I smiled, made small talk, and watched my family perform. Preston was at his best, confident and charming, working the room like he'd been born to it. My parents flanked him like proud generals, name-dropping their son's accomplishments to anyone who'd listen. Melissa held court with the other wives, discussing private schools and vacation homes. I was introduced as Preston's sister, or occasionally our daughter Kaylee. No one asked what I did. When they talked to me at all, it was to compliment my dress or ask where I lived. When I said I lived in Virginia, they nodded politely and moved on. I was furniture, decorative, appropriate, forgettable. The dinner began. We were seated at a long table, Keith Barrington at the head, Preston to his right. I was near the end, between my father and a junior partner, whose name I immediately forgot. The food was exceptional, the wine was probably worth more than my dress, and the conversation flowed easily around me. Barrington was exactly what I'd expected. Late 50s, silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of being the most important person in any room. He talked about the firm's success, about Preston's contributions, about the exciting future ahead. Preston glowed, my mother glowed, my father glowed. Even Melissa looked proud, basking in reflected glory. Then Barrington turned his attention down the table. "So," he said, his voice carrying easily over the murmur of conversation, "Preston tells me you have a sister. I don't believe we've met." The table quieted slightly, all eyes turned to me. "Kaylee," I said, extending my hand across the table. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Barrington." "Keith, please." His handshake was firm, professional. "Preston speaks very highly of you. What do you do, Kaylee?" The question hung in the air. I saw my mother's face tighten slightly, saw Preston's smile become fixed, saw my father reach for his wine glass. "I work for the government," I said, keeping my tone light. "Security-related. It's terribly boring, actually." "Ah, government work." Barrington nodded knowingly. "Important, if not always glamorous. What agency?" "Defense," I said, which was technically true and completely uninformative. My father cleared his throat. "Kaylee's had a bit of a varied career path. She's still finding her niche." "Dad," Preston started. No, it's fine," my father continued, his voice taking on that particular tone of parental disappointment mixed with forced cheerfulness. "Not everyone's meant for the corporate world. Kaylee's more of a free spirit. She does odd jobs, helps people out, very generous with her time." "That's not," I began. "She pet sits," my mother added brightly, as if this explained everything. "For vacationers. Goes to their houses, feeds the cats, scoops litter boxes. It's very hands-on work." The silence that followed was exquisite. I watched Barrington's face carefully, saw the confusion flicker across his features, saw him glance at Preston, as if to confirm he'd heard correctly. Preston's face had gone red. Melissa looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. But my father wasn't done. He swirled his wine, staring into it like it held answers to questions he hadn't asked. "She feeds cats for vacationers, goes to their houses, scoops litter boxes." His voice was flat, discontented, the words falling like stones into still water. The table went completely quiet. The junior partner next to me suddenly found his plate fascinating. A woman across from us studied her wine glass. Preston's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. Their looks made me feel uneasy, not because they were judging me. I'd stopped caring about that years ago, but because I could see the pity, the secondhand embarrassment, the awkward certainty that they were witnessing something uncomfortable. Poor Preston, with his disappointing sister. Poor Mr. and Mrs. Radford with their underachieving daughter. Poor Kaylee, who couldn't get her life together, even in her 40s. I should have laughed. I should have thrown my napkin down and walked out. I should have done literally anything except sit there, watching my family publicly humiliate me at my brother's celebration dinner, in front of his boss and colleagues, in a Michelin-starred restaurant where the wine probably cost more than... Barrington's phone lit up on the table. He glanced at it, frowned, picked it up. I watched his face change as he read whatever was on the screen. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. He read it again. Then he looked up, directly at me, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to something that might have been horror. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Every head at the table turned to him. "Major," he said, his voice sharp with military precision. Then, softer, almost apologetic, "My apologies, I didn't recognize you without your uniform." The world stopped. I watched my father's hand freeze halfway to his mouth, wine glass suspended in air. My mother's eyes went wide, her pearl necklace suddenly too tight around her throat. Preston's face drained of color, white as the tablecloth beneath his plate. Barrington was still standing, waiting. I could see it now. The way he held himself, the set of his shoulders, the unconscious straightening of his spine. Military bearing. Once a Marine, always a Marine. "Mr. Barrington," I said carefully. "Colonel Barrington, retired," he corrected. "I served with General Morrison at Camp Pendleton. He just texted me, said his daughter was handling our Syria operation briefing this week, and I should make sure to thank you for pushing it back for family obligations." He smiled, but there was steel underneath. "His daughter is Captain Morrison, your second in command, I believe?" The junior partner next to me had stopped breathing. Across the table, Melissa's mouth was open. "That's correct, sir," I said. "Syria operation?" my father said faintly. "Captain?" "But you said—" "I said I work in security for the government." I turned to look at him directly. I believe my exact words were, "Defense. Terribly boring." Both of those statements were true. "But the pet sitting," my mother started, "was a favor for my neighbor, once, 3 years ago." I kept my voice level, conversational. "You took that single data point and built an entire narrative around it. I never corrected you because, honestly, it became fascinating to watch." Preston found his voice. "You're a major? In the Marines?" "For the last 5 years, yes. Before that, I was a captain for 7 years. Before that, a first lieutenant. I've been an officer for 19 years, Preston. I tried to tell you. Multiple times. You didn't listen." Barrington was watching this exchange with the expression of a man who'd just realized he'd walked into a minefield. "I apologize for interrupting your family dinner," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't apologize for much. "But I felt I should clarify. Major Radford here is running one of the most critical counterterrorism operations in the Middle East. She commands a unit responsible for coordinating joint operations between the U.S. military and 3 allied intelligence services. She's briefed the Secretary of Defense. Twice." He paused, his smile thin. "So perhaps not quite the same as scooping litter boxes." My father's wine glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the edge of his plate with a sharp crack, wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. He didn't move to clean it up. Just stared at me, his face gray. My mother's hand had gone to her throat, fingers clutching her pearls like a lifeline. 19 years, she whispered. "You've been, for 19 years? "I told you I was joining the military, Mom. You cried." Dad asked if I'd considered something more appropriate. Preston laughed. "But you never— we thought—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "You thought I was a failure," I said quietly. "You thought I was bouncing between odd jobs, never settling down, never measuring up. You thought that because it fit the story you wanted to tell. The successful son and the disappointing daughter. It was cleaner that way." Preston's voice was barely audible. "Why didn't you correct us?" I looked at my brother, really looked at him, saw the confusion, the hurt, the dawning realization of what he'd been doing for nearly 2 decades. "I tried, Preston. You didn't listen. So eventually, I stopped trying." I stood, placing my napkin carefully on the table. "Congratulations on your promotion. You've earned it. You're good at what you do." "Kaylee," my mother started. "I need to catch a train." I turned to Barrington, extending my hand. "Colonel, it was an honor to meet you." He shook my hand, his grip firm, his eyes sharp with understanding and perhaps a hint of approval. "The honor was mine, Major. Semper Fi." "Semper Fi, sir." I walked out of Cristallo into the cold November night, leaving behind a table full of people who'd finally, after 19 years, seen me clearly. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. I could feel their stares like physical weight, could imagine the silence I'd left behind, the questions that would echo through that dining room long after I was gone. My phone buzzed as I reached the corner. A text from Colonel Hayes Morrison says the briefing went well. "See you Monday. Hope your family thing was worth it." I smiled, typing back, "It was, sir. Definitely worth it." Another text came through. "Preston, I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. We didn't know." I stared at those words for a long moment, then I typed, "You could have known, you chose not to. There's a difference." I slipped my phone into my purse and walked toward the subway, heels clicking against the pavement, the city's noise washing over me like absolution. Behind me, in a Michelin-starred restaurant where the wine cost more than most people's weekly salary, my family was finally understanding what I'd known for 19 years. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you. And then, when the moment is exactly right, let them see who you've always been. The train back to Virginia was half empty. I sat by the window, watching the darkness blur past, thinking about wine glasses and false narratives and the weight of 19 years of silence. My dress uniform was still in the garment bag above my seat. I hadn't needed it. Barrington's text had done the work for me. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired and sad and strangely free. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Preston. Can we talk, please? Not yet, I thought. Not yet. Monday morning, I'd brief CENTCOM on Operation Sentinel Dawn. I'd coordinate with the CIA, liaise with Allied forces, and do the job I'd been doing for 19 years. The job my family had finally, publicly, been forced to acknowledge. But tonight, I was just Kaylee Radford sitting on a train, going home. And that, finally, felt like enough.